Today we're looking at a black ink by Montegrappa. It's called Black. Hi, I'm Adam and I'm an ink guy. Down below there's timestamps so that if there's only certain things you're interested, you can skip around to it. But if you've got the time, I would appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram. And if you like fountain pen ink reviews and are new here, I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then inked up this Sailor My First pen with a medium fine nib. I used it to write for a day and then used it to take the notes for this video. I standardized my first writing sample by using Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper on all of the tests that I do. I do use other papers, and some of those will show up later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. Now the extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 11 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 18 seconds to dry. The scrubbies both show us no color variation. Tomoe River. No bleeding and normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub. It has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade, 17 seconds to dry. Medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine, still not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade, 30 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, but they do kind of show us what looks like it should be a little bit of a sheen. Yeah, looks like it's showing a little bit of what should be a sheen. I don't think it's going to come through on the camera, but it's not there in the writing. Rhodia, no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 13 seconds to dry. Medium is only about a tone darker than than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 19 seconds to dry. Again, the scrubby shows us no color variation, and we don't get any color variation. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this, I'm going to call it a dark bluish tone at the bottom. It pushes its way up and we see the black, and it's almost like a black purple at the very top. It's almost, it could be my eyes playing tricks on me, but I think I see a little bit of kind of a purpley tone at the very, very top there. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And it is a very noticeable black line at the bottom. It does push its way just a little bit. You see some lighter area, but it is really bonding with this as it's moving up. It's really starting to show some permanence to it. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I'm a little surprised after seeing the second chromatography for the amount of blowout that's occurring here. There's a lot of feathering, a lot of blurriness, but I can still read everything that's there, which will let me go ahead and feel fine using this in the note-taking situation if I wanted to highlight. Now, any of the shimmery bits you see that might come through in this picture are not a part of the ink. They're transferred from a paper towel. Water is only lifting some of the darker tones, but it's leaving a lot of ink behind here. It is really not getting this out of the way. Pen flush does a bit more than water does if you look at the lower right side of where that pen flush was put, it is getting much thinner. I really do think that given more than 30 seconds, it will break down the ink even more and completely get rid of it. 1/3 bleach solution is sort of really removing it from the paper. We've got this lot of brown left behind, a brown I don't remember seeing in the chromatography. But it does make me get a red flag to say, test this ink in a more inexpensive pen, just to make sure that you don't get any kind of staining issues. As far as viscosity or flow, for the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Montegrappa Black has a viscosity of 1.87, making this a wetter ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples, and for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Montegrappa Black has an average dry time of 18 seconds, so despite it being a wetter ink, its dry time is normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Montegrappa Black, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I wanted a nice green, and I went with Birmingham Pen Company's Southside Park Fern Moss. The second writing sample is done on Limone, black and red, and Levenger paper. Here we're looking at Limone paper. We get a lot of bleed spots that occur, a lot of spotting, not all the way through the paper, but definitely deep into the paper with the stub and with the medium, not a lot with the extra fine. It's also caused a lot of show through in those. The extra fine is very good with that. Now the 1.1 stub has feathering all over it, tiny little feathering, not so bad that it's distracting away from everything that's there, but not necessarily something I want in more long-term notes. It has no spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. The medium is about the same dark tone as the stub. Here though it doesn't feather. It has no spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows no color variation. We didn't expect it, and we didn't get it. Black and red notebooks. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is only ever so slightly lighter than the stub. It has no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 6 seconds to dry. The medium is ever so slightly darker than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. And last up is Levenger notebooks, with no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine again is ever so slightly lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 6 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, about the same as the stub, with no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 10 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us no real color variation, and we don't get it, and that is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Montegrappa Black? This is a well-behaved, nice ink. My problem is it does offer tone variation in the writing, or shading. Now I don't like shading in my black inks. I want them to be a solid black all the way through. That makes it not a good black ink for me. However, it is not a bad black ink. So what nib and pen would give the best writing experience with this ink? A wet or very wet fine really puts down enough to help drown out any of that shading that can occur. Put down a very nice solid black, making this a very usable black for me. However, don't put it into a Fude pen, as I had a lot of shading issues with that Fude nib in the Duke 209. I didn't like that. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if it's your first time here, I'm going to remind you, if you enjoyed it, subscribe. Thanks for watching.